I lost my brother in 2022. I realized that my fear of grief and death and where it might take me was actually keeping me stuck in the belly of it. Hello and welcome. My name's Nafisa. I have a background in psychotherapy, and I also have a passion for helping Black and brown women use rebellion as a tool to reclaim their time and energy for their own dreams. Now, within my profession, I'm often confronted with the damning statistics about Black and brown women's physical and mental health. And I don't think that there's a way to understand those statistics in truth without considering the societal pressure on Black and brown women to sacrifice and betray ourselves for the comfort and the benefit of others. Now, this expectation, whether it's spoken or unspoken, is not a stranger to most Black and brown women, including myself. And I would say that I came head to head with this expectation when I lost my brother in 2022. And in my own delicate rebellion against these expectations, my brother's passing became my rebirth. At first, I tried to manage my grief because I worried that if I surrendered to it, that it might kill me too, that it might take me under physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally. And in a society like this one that encourages a machine-like existence in order to survive, losing control doesn't feel like an option. But after some time, I realized that my fear of grief and death and where it might take me was actually keeping me stuck in the belly of it. So instead of doing what was expected of me, instead of trying to manage and contain my grief, I surrendered to it. I let go. I leaned into it and opened myself up to allow it to teach me. I allowed it to take me on its journey, and it really took me on a journey. It taught me that death and life were symbiotic, that for anything to live, there has to have been death involved, that nothing can be birthed or created or live without something that previously existed dying in some way, shape or form. A way of living, a mentality, a system, a person, whatever it is, death has to be involved in the creation of anything, including life. So that journey taught me that to honor death and grief was to love. And as someone that's from Ghana originally, a country that loves funerals and has huge and really important traditions and rituals surrounding death and funerals, I had always wondered why it was made such a big deal of, why death and why funerals and burials were such a big thing back home. And I felt in this, having this journey myself, having this experience, taught me that my ancestors knew exactly what they were doing, because I learned so much on this journey about the importance of death and the importance of grief and how attached it is to anything to do with life and to do with creation. That journey allowed me to understand that to be stripped down, broken down by grief was a privilege. It was actually a gift. It was an opportunity to let that energy take me down to the lowest, darkest parts of myself, and then to have the opportunity to use that same energy, that grief, for creation, to be able to recreate myself, to create my world with a level of richness and of love that I didn't have before, a depth that I didn't have before. And so I always say that even though I wish my brother was still here, in his death, he gave me a second life. My brother's death urgently put me in touch with my life and how I was spending it. And it made me curious about those around me too, those that were just like me, how they were spending their lives. Were we really choosing to spend life this way, or were we bound by the shoulds and have tos? By leaning into this journey, I was able to lift my head above the tide, above the school, which is ironically the name for a group of fish swimming in the same direction. I was able to lift my head and give myself a wider view. And that's when I knew that I was going to have to do something different to the school. I was going to have to lean into rebellion if I was going to get anywhere close to what my dreams were. That's where I started to set myself free. I was able to stop playing the game of life the way that the system told me was the only way to play it, and to start exploring honestly and truthfully what I wanted my version of the game to be. I stopped arguing for my limitations, and that was a really strict rule that I had for myself. And I started to set my intention to see opportunities where I would usually see limitations. And giving myself that permission led to me taking almost a whole year off work and spending majority of that time in another country and therefore in another reality. I was exposed to opportunities, to investments that I didn't even think were possible for me before doing so. Through this rebellion, I was giving my life journey options that I never even knew existed before. And the thing that made this feel so magical is that as I would set my intention and take a step in that direction, it's like the whole world and the whole universe would bend and fold to make it happen. What I started to realize was that rebelling against the status quo was expanding my world and the opportunities within it. And at every stage of this rebellion, people told me about their limitations. Sometimes they would be telling me about what they perceived to be my limitations. They would tell me how risky it was, how much they wished that they could do the same thing but couldn't. And that's the thing about comfort, is that when we try to avoid the death of our own comfort, it keeps us stuck. And I'm reminded of this example of frogs that I heard. I don't even know if this is true. I've never researched it for myself, but apparently if you put a frog directly in boiling hot water, it will immediately try and jump out of that boiling hot water. But if you put a frog in cold water and you slowly heat that water up over time, the frog will allow itself to boil to death. The process of being slowly boiled to death feels so much more comfortable to the frog that it's not perceived to be the risk that it actually is. And that's why the biggest risk to us is sometimes our comfort zone. And if we stay in it long enough, we'll realize why. And what my own experience taught me, what I realized on this journey, is that sometimes the perceived safety, our own comfort zone, is exactly where we need to start our rebellion to set ourselves free. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this video and to my story, and I'll see you again soon.